Okay, so picture this, an NFL champion that just vanishes. A team that climbs all the way to the top of the mountain, wins it all, and then is basically erased from the history books. Today, we're going to dig into the truly bizarre story of the Cleveland Bulldogs. It's a pretty simple question, right? But the answer is anything but. And to find it, yeah, we've got to jump back in time to the early, kind of Wild West days of pro football. A time when a team to be the best in the league and then just disappear. And look, let's be clear, we're not talking about some disputed title from a rival league or anything like that. No, this was a legitimate league-sanctioned champion of the National Football League. That's the real head-scratcher here. The 1924 Cleveland Bulldogs were the official NFL champions. So how does a team like that just fade away? Well, it all starts with how this team was even put together in the first place. See, the Bulldogs' championship story isn't some scrappy underdog tale. It's a story about a smart, kind of ruthless business move, the kind of thing you could only pull off in the brand new anything-goes NFL of the 1920s. It all kicks off with this guy, Sam Deutsch. See, he wasn't some diehard football purist. He was a businessman, a jeweler and boxing promoter who saw an opportunity. In 1923, he owned a perfectly okay Cleveland team. But Sam Deutsch had much, much bigger plans. $2,500. Think about that. In today's sports world, what does that get you? Maybe a couple of really good season tickets? Well, back in 1924, that number was enough to buy a championship. Yup, for $2,500, Sam Deutsch went out and bought the entire roster of the defending NFL champions, the Canton Bulldogs, who were just about to go broke. He didn't just buy a few players, he basically bought the title. So what does he do? He takes all the best players from that championship Canton team, smashes them together with his own Cleveland roster, and bam, he's created an instant powerhouse. He even, and this was smart, he even renamed them the Cleveland Bulldogs to keep that championship brand recognition going. But, just building the super team wasn't enough. Holding on to that title proved to be a whole other battle. The 1924 season ended with one of the league's first ever major controversies, one that really put a big question mark over their whole championship. Okay, so when the regular season officially ended, Cleveland was in first place. Now, back then, the rules were a little different. Ties didn't actually count against your winning percentage, which is why Cleveland had this tiny little edge over the Chicago Bears. So that's it, right? Case closed? Well, not exactly. Okay, so follow this. The season officially ends on November 30th. Cleveland's on top. But the Bears, and get this, their owner was the guy who proposed that end date. They convinced Cleveland to play this postseason challenge match a week later. And in that game, the Bears just crush them. So, of course, the Bears immediately start arguing that this game should count, that it should vault them into first place. But when all the league owners got together, they just looked at the rules they had all agreed on. The game was played after the season was over. It was basically a glorified and very profitable exhibition game. And this is just a perfect window into how the early NFL worked. In January of 1925, the owners literally just got in a room and voted, and the title, officially and rightfully, went to the Cleveland Bulldogs. They were the champs. But believe it or not, this was the beginning of the end. You'd think winning a championship would be the start of something great, right? A dynasty? Well, for the Bulldogs, it was pretty much the opposite. It was the start of a collapse, and a really fast, really messy one. I mean, the whole thing just fell apart immediately. First, Deutsch sells the original Canton players back to a new Canton team for $3,000, making a quick buck. His team in Cleveland, now totally gutted, has a terrible losing record and is basically bankrupt by the end of 25. It got so bad, they didn't even play in 1926. The whole franchise just stopped. They did come back in 27, but it wasn't the same team at all. It was just patched together with guys from another team that folded. But in one last kind of desperate attempt to save the whole thing, the new Bulldogs made a huge move. They signed one of the biggest stars in the game for what was at the time an absolutely insane amount of money. That star was a quarterback named Benny Friedman, who was one of the first truly great passers in football history. His $18,000 contract was just massive. Only the legendary Red Grange was making more. It was a huge, bold gamble, but it wasn't enough to save the team in Cleveland. Turns out, their real story, their true legacy would end up somewhere completely different. Okay, so this is where the story gets its final, just unbelievable twist. The Bulldogs didn't just fade away into nothing. No, in a way, their DNA got absorbed by one of the most famous, most iconic franchises in the entire NFL. And let's just be clear about something. Despite all this chaos, this was a legit organization with incredible talent. I mean, look at this list. 4 guys who played for the Bulldogs ended up in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. This was not some fluke team. So, after that 27 season, the team gets sold again, and it moves to Detroit. For 1 year, they were the Detroit Wolverines, hoping that Friedman's star power would bring in the crowds. But their journey, it still wasn't finished. And here it is, the last piece of this crazy puzzle. In 1929, the owner of the New York Giants, a guy named Tim Mara, he buys the entire Detroit Wolverines franchise. And he did it for one reason, to get Benny Friedman. The Wolverines as a team were dissolved, and all of its players, the very last remnants of those 1924 champion Cleveland Bulldogs, were just folded right into the Giants. That vanished champion? It was still alive, just hidden inside the DNA of the New York Giants. The whole story of the Cleveland Bulldogs is just this wild reminder, History isn't always written by the winners. Sometimes it's just written by whoever's left standing. And it really makes you wonder, how many other incredible stories, how many other forgotten champions are just buried in the early history of the sports we think we know so well?